The afternoon sun cast long shadows over the bustling streets of the city as Mary stepped out of the Church of Abundant Grace, her heart light and a serene smile on her lips. The last few weeks had been a journey of discovery and transformation, each day bringing a new revelation about the unconditional love she was learning to know. But fate, with its sense of irony, chose that precise moment to cast a shadow over Mary's newly lit path. As she descended the steps of the church, a familiar voice cut through the air like a sharp blade. "Maria, is that really you?" Mary's blood ran cold in her veins. That voice, a voice she hadn't heard in years, a voice that belonged to a past she had fought so hard to leave behind. Slowly, as if moved by a force beyond her control, she turned around. There, standing on the sidewalk, was his father. Time seemed to freeze at that moment. Maria felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet, leaving her suspended in a limbo between her newfound present and a past she thought she had buried. Her father, Roberto, was different from what she remembered. The years had not been kind to him. Her hair, once black like Maria's, was now speckled with gray. Deep wrinkles marked his face, silent witnesses of a difficult life. Her eyes, however, were the same, dark and intense, now fixed on Maria with a mixture of surprise and something she couldn't decipher. Remorse? Hope? Fear? Dad? The word slipped from Mary's lips like a whisper, laden with years of pent-up emotions, anger, hurt, longing. Roberto took a hesitant step towards her, his hands trembling slightly at her sides. "Mary, my daughter, I can't believe I finally found you." Maria felt a wave of contradictory emotions go through her body. Part of her wanted to run, to escape from this ghost of her past. Another part, the part that was still that little girl longing for her father's love, wanted to throw herself into his arms. "What are you doing here?" she managed to ask, her voice firmer than she felt inside. Roberto ran his hand through his gray hair, a gesture that Maria remembered from her childhood. I've been looking for you, daughter, for years. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I needed to see you. I needed to tell you." At that moment, the door of the church opened again, and Pastor John came out, his face lighting up at the sight of Mary. However, his smile faltered when he noticed the palpable tension in the air. "Maria, is everything okay?" John asked, approaching cautiously. Mary felt a wave of gratitude for John's comforting presence. She took a deep breath, seeking the strength and peace she had found in recent weeks. "Pastor John," she said, her voice trembling slightly, This is my father." John's eyes widened in understanding. He knew parts of Maria's story. He knew the abandonment, the pain she carried. "I see," John said softly, placing a gentle hand on Mary's shoulder. "Maybe it's better to talk inside?" Maria hesitated, her gaze alternating between João and her father. Roberto seemed smaller somehow, hunched under the weight of years of regret. "Please, Maria," Roberto pleaded, his voice broken. Just give me a few minutes. I know I don't deserve it, but..." It was at that moment that something inside Maria moved. The words of a song she had sung earlier that day echoed in her mind. "Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive." With a deep sigh, Maria nodded. "That's okay. Let's talk." As the three of them entered the church, Maria felt as if she were on the threshold of something monumental. Her past and her present were colliding in a way she could never have predicted. How would she navigate these turbulent waters? How would his newfound faith be tested by this unexpected return to his past? John guided them to his office, a cozy space with bookshelves and a window that overlooked a small garden. Maria sat down in one of the chairs, feeling suddenly exhausted. Roberto took the opposite seat, his restless hands on his lap. "I'll leave them alone," John said softly, "but I'll be right out there if they need me." When the door closed behind John, a heavy silence fell over the office. Maria looked at her father, actually seeing him for the first time in years. There was so much she wanted to say, so many questions, so much accumulated anger, but also, surprisingly, there was a spark of compassion. Why? That was all she could say, that single word, carrying the weight of years of abandonment and loneliness. Roberto closed his eyes as if the question had hit him physically. When he opened them again, they were glowing with unshed tears. "I failed you, Maria," he began, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I failed as a father, as a husband, as a man. When your mother died, I got lost. Alcohol became my escape, my excuse. I thought you'd be better off without me." Mary felt her own tears begin to fall. "I needed you," she whispered. "I needed my father." Roberto nodded, guilt evident in every line of his face. "I know. God, I know. And there is not a day that I do not regret having left. But Maria, I'm here now. I've been sober for 3 years, and I want to be a part of your life again, if you allow me." Maria closed her eyes, feeling the weight of this decision. Her heart was in turmoil, years of heartache fighting the desire for healing and reconciliation that her newfound faith had awakened in her. When she opened her eyes again, she saw her father, not the man who had abandoned her, but a broken man, seeking redemption. And in that moment, Maria made a choice that would change the course of their lives. "Dad," she said, her voice steady through tears, "I can't promise it will be easy. There is much to be healed, much to be rebuilt, but I'm willing to try." Roberto's face lit up with a mixture of relief and gratitude. "It's more than I deserve, daughter. Much more," as father and daughter began to navigate the turbulent waters of their shared past. Outside the office, Pastor João offered a silent prayer. He knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but he also knew that the power of love and forgiveness could work miracles. The return of Mary's past was not the end of her faith journey, but rather the beginning of a new chapter, one that would test her newfound faith in ways she could never have imagined. The sun had already set when Maria finally left the church, her head spinning with the emotions of the unexpected encounter with her father. The streets of the city, normally a whirlwind of activity, seemed eerily quiet, as if the world was giving Maria the space she needed to process everything that had happened. As he walked home, each step felt heavier than the last. Her father's words echoed in her mind, mingling with long-buried memories, the smell of alcohol on her breath as he put her to sleep, the sound of doors slamming during nightly discussions, the deafening silence that followed his departure. Maria stopped at a small bridge that crossed the city's river. Leaning against the parapet, she watched the dark waters flow below, feeling as turbulent as the current. "How can I forgive?" she whispered into the evening. "How can I just forget years of pain?" A gentle breeze caressed his face, as if it were a gentle response from the universe. Maria closed her eyes, letting the tears she had held back throughout the conversation with her father finally fall. When she got home, Maria sat on her worn sofa, hugging a pillow as if it were a shield against the world. His gaze wandered across the room, landing on a Bible that Pastor John had given him a few weeks ago. With trembling hands, she picked it up, opening it randomly. His eyes fell upon a passage. "For if ye forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you." Matthew 6:14. Maria felt as if the words had jumped off the page directly into her heart. "Forgive," she murmured, testing the word on her tongue as if it were a new taste. In the days that followed, Maria found herself in a constant internal battle. Each morning brought a new resolution to try to forgive, to open her heart to the possibility of healing. But each night he found her exhausted, struggling with years of hurt and resentment. A week after their initial meeting, Maria agreed to meet her father for coffee. The place chosen was a small coffee shop near the church, a neutral ground for both. When Maria arrived, her father was already there, nervously twirling a cup of coffee between his hands. Upon seeing her, he stood up abruptly, almost knocking over the chair. "Maria," he said, his voice trembling. I'm glad you came." Maria nodded stiffly, sitting at the table. For a few moments, an uncomfortable silence hung between them. "I started attending meetings," Roberto finally said, breaking the silence. "Alcoholics Anonymous. It's helping me understand a lot of things." Maria looked at her father, really watching him. There was a fragility in him that she had never noticed before, a vulnerability that took her by surprise. "Why now?" she asked softly. Why after all these years? Roberto sighed deeply, running his hand through his gray hair. I hit rock bottom, Maria. I lost everything. My job, my home, my dignity. And in the midst of all this chaos, I realized that the biggest loss of all was you, my daughter. The words hit Maria like a punch in the far stomach. She felt the tears forming, but held them tightly. You have no idea how much I needed you, Maria said, her voice trembling with suppressed emotion. On nights when I cried alone, on days when I felt lost and scared. Where were you? Roberto lowered his head, the shame evident in every line of his face. I was lost, Maria, lost in my own pain, in my own selfishness. There are no excuses for what I did, for how much I hurt you. I just hope that in time you can find in your heart a place to forgive me. Maria closed her eyes, feeling the weight of that moment. She thought about all the times she had dreamed of this moment, wondering what she would say, how she would feel. The reality was much more complicated, much more painful, and yet strangely liberating. I want to forgive, she finally said, opening her eyes to face her father. I really want to, but it will take time and work of both of us. Robert nodded vigorously, unshed tears shining in his eyes. I will do whatever it takes, Maria. I promise. In the months that followed, Maria found herself on a healing journey that she could never have imagined. There were days of progress when she felt that forgiveness was within her grasp, and there were days of backsliding when the pain of the past seemed as fresh as it had ever been. She leaned on her newfound faith, seeking guidance from the scriptures and the kind words of Pastor John. She also began attending a support group for adults dealing with childhood trauma, finding comfort and strength in the shared stories of others. One evening, after a particularly intense session with her support group, Maria found herself back on that small bridge over the river. But this time, as she looked down at the waters below, she felt no turbulence. Instead, he felt a strange peace. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, she said to herself, remembering her counselor's words. It means choosing freedom over resentment. At that moment, under the starry sky and with the soft sound of the river flowing below, Maria made a choice. She chose to forgive, not because her father deserved it, but because she deserved peace. The road ahead would still be long and, at times, difficult. There would be days when forgiveness would seem impossible, when the pain of the past would threaten to swallow it. But Mary knew now that she had the strength to face these days, to continue choosing forgiveness, day after day. As she walked away from the bridge, Maria felt as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Forgiveness, she realized, was not a destination, but a journey, and she was just getting started. Autumn had arrived in town, painting the trees with shades of red and gold. Maria walked through the park, the dry leaves crackling beneath her feet, creating a soft symphony that echoed her restless thoughts. She had arranged to meet her father there, a neutral ground, far from the painful memories of her childhood. Home. In the distance, she spotted Roberto sitting on a bench, feeding the pigeons with pieces of stale bread. The scene was so ordinary, so normal, that for a moment, Maria felt a twinge of nostalgia for a childhood she never had. "Hi, Dad," she said softly, moving closer. Roberto looked up, a hesitant smile forming on his wrinkled face. "Maria, I'm glad you came." She sat next to him, keeping a careful distance. The silence between them was palpable, laden with years of unspoken words and pent-up emotions. "I brought you something," Roberto said finally, rummaging through a bag next to him. He took out an old photo album, the leather cover worn by time. Maria picked up the album with trembling hands. When she opened it, she was flooded with images of an almost forgotten past. Photos of her as a baby, smiling toothlessly at the camera. Her mother, young and radiant, holding her in her arms. And Roberto, with dark hair and a carefree smile, so different from the man sitting next to him now. "I've kept it all these years," Roberto said softly. It was my way of holding on to you, even when I was too far away to go back." Maria felt the tears forming in her eyes. "Why didn't you ever come back?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. Roberto sighed deeply, his eyes fixed on a distant photo. Fear, he admitted. Fear that I wasn't good enough, that I was just going to hurt you more. And then, the more time passed, the harder it seemed to come back. Maria nodded, slowly, turning the pages of the album. Each photo was like a window into a world that could have been, into a family that never fully existed. "I want to try, Dad," she said finally, closing the album. "I want to try to build something new. We can't change the past, but maybe we can create a different future." Roberto's eyes filled with tears. "It's more than I deserve, daughter, but I promise I'll do my best not to disappoint you again." In the weeks that followed, Maria and Roberto began to build a new relationship, brick by brick. It wasn't easy. There were moments of tension when old hurts threatened to resurface. There were uncomfortable silences and difficult conversations. But there were also moments of genuine connection, like when Roberto attended one of Maria's concerts for the first time, sitting in the front row with a bouquet of daisies, her favorites as a child. Or when Maria, hesitantly, invited her father to a Sunday lunch at church, introducing him to Pastor João and the community that had become his second family. One day, while they were walking together after one of these lunches, Roberto stopped abruptly. "Maria," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "I know I can't erase the years I've lost, but I want you to know that I'm proud of you, of the strong and talented woman you have become, in spite of me." Maria felt something break inside her, not of pain, but of relief. It was as if a wall she didn't even know existed was finally crumbling. "Thank you, Dad," she replied, surprising them both by stepping forward and hugging him. The hug was awkward at first, years of physical and emotional distance making the gesture almost awkward. But little by little, father and daughter relaxed into the embrace, letting years of heartache and regret flow between them. As autumn gave way to winter, the relationship between Mary and Robert continued to evolve. They began to create new traditions: cafes on Sunday afternoons, walks through the park on Saturday mornings. Roberto even began attending church with Mary occasionally, finding comfort in the hymns and words of Pastor John. One day, during one of these services, the pastor spoke about the prodigal son, about the power of forgiveness and reconciliation. Maria, sitting next to her father, felt his hand seek hers. When their gazes met, no words were needed. In that quiet moment, they both understood the miracle they were living, the miracle of forgiveness, of second chances, of love that can overcome even the deepest wounds. The reconciliation between Mary and Robert was not a one-time event, but an ongoing process. There were days of progress and days of regression, moments of shared joy and moments of resurrected pain. But through it all, they both remained committed to the process, anchored in Mary's newfound faith and Roberto's sincere desire to do the right things. As spring approached, bringing with it the promise of renewal, Mary reflected on the journey she and her father had traveled. It wasn't a perfect story, it wasn't a fairy tale happy ending. It was something more real, deeper, a story of healing, of forgiveness, and of a love that, although damaged, had never been completely lost. As she prepared for another Sunday lunch with her father, Maria smiled at her reflection in the mirror. The woman who stared back at her was no longer that hurt and lost girl. She was a strong woman, capable of loving and forgiving, even in the face of the deepest wounds. "Thank you," she whispered, not only to God but to herself for having had the courage to embark on this journey of reconciliation. And as she went out to meet her father, Mary felt a peace that was beyond comprehension, the peace of one who had finally found her way back home. The afternoon sun filtered through the colorful stained glass windows of the Church of Abundant Grace, casting a kaleidoscope of color over Mary as she helped arrange the chairs for the Bible study group. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and homemade cookies filled the air, creating a welcoming atmosphere that had become so familiar to her in recent months. "Mary," called Pastor John, entering the room with a warm smile. "Have you a moment?" She nodded, putting the last chair in place before joining him. Pastor João guided her to his office, a cozy space filled with books and mementos from years of ministry. "I've been watching you for the past few weeks," he began, sitting behind his desk. "Your dedication, your passion to share your faith, it's inspiring." Maria felt her cheeks flush with the unexpected compliment. "Thank you, Pastor. I just want to give back in some way, after all that God has done for me." Pastor John smiled, his eyes shining with something that seemed to be a mixture of pride and expectation. "That's why I wanted to talk to you. We have a new project starting, a music ministry for at-risk youth. I thought you might be the perfect person to lead this." Maria blinked, surprised. "Me? But I have barely begun my journey of faith. How could I lead others?" "Sometimes, Mary," the pastor replied softly, "it is precisely those who are at the beginning of their journey who have the most powerful stories to share. His experience, his music, his transformation, it can touch hearts in a way that traditional sermons can't." Pastor John's words resonated deeply with Mary. She thought about her own journey, the dark nights of loneliness, the struggle with addictions, and the pain of abandonment. And then he thought of the light he had found, the healing he was experiencing. I can try," she said finally, her voice trembling slightly with a mixture of fear and excitement. In the weeks that followed, Maria found herself plunged into a new world of possibilities. She spent hours planning music lessons, selecting songs that spoke of hope, redemption, and unconditional love. His own compositions, previously full of pain and questions, now gained a new dimension, becoming living testimonies of transformation. The first day of the ministry came faster than she expected. Maria was standing before a group of teenagers, their faces a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and, in some cases, sheer rebelliousness. She recognized in these young people the reflection of who she herself had been not long ago. "Hi, everyone," she began, her voice firmer than it felt inside. "My name is Maria, and I'm here to share something with you. Not sermons or rules, but music. And maybe, if you want, a little bit of my story." As she spoke, Maria picked up her guitar and began strumming softly. The melody, one of his new compositions, spoke of a love that tirelessly seeks, that never gives up. "In the dark streets I wandered aimlessly, searching every corner for a little light. But it was in the silence that I heard his call, a love so great that it led me." As the music flowed, Maria saw something change in the eyes of the young people. Skepticism began to give way to curiosity, and in some faces, it saw the glow of recognition, the realization that someone finally spoke a language they could understand. After the song, Maria shared her story. He talked about lonely nights in bars, about the desperate search for acceptance and love. He spoke about the void that no applause or bottle could fill. And then, with tears in her eyes, she talked about the moment she found. Something bigger than herself, a love that accepted her exactly as she was. "I'm not here to say I have all the answers," she concluded, looking into the eyes of each young woman. "I'm here because, like you, I'm still learning, I'm still growing. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that we're never alone. We're never beyond the reach of love." The silence that followed was broken by a girl in the front row, her eyes shining with suppressed tears. Do you really think there's hope for someone like me?" Mary's heart was filled with compassion. She knelt before the girl, taking her hands in hers. "There is hope for all of us," she said softly. "I am living proof of that." In the months that followed, Mary's music ministry blossomed beyond her wildest expectations. Young people who had previously avoided church now filled the room every week, eager not only for the music, but for the message of love and acceptance that Mary shared. She saw transformations take place before her eyes. Addicts finding freedom, broken hearts being healed, lives being redirected. And in each story of transformation, Maria saw reflections of her own journey. One day, after a particularly powerful session, Pastor John approached Mary, his eyes shining with paternal pride. "Do you see it now?" he asked gently. "Do you see why God brought you here?" Maria looked around the room, at the smiling, hopeful faces of the young people who had become not only her students, but her extended family. She thought about her own journey, The fights, the falls, and the victories. Yes, she replied, feeling a wave of gratitude enveloping her. I see, and I'm so grateful to be a part of it. While packing her things to leave, Maria took her notebook of compositions. The pages were filled with new music, songs of hope, redemption, and a love that never fails. She smiled, realizing that her unexpected ministry was not only to the young people she taught, but also to herself. Every note, every letter, every life touched was a testament to the transformative power of love, a love that had found Mary in the depths of her despair and lifted her to heights she never imagined possible. And so, with a full heart and a song on her lips, Maria went out to face a new day, knowing that her journey of transformation was far from over. In fact, she was just getting started. The recording studio was a world apart, isolated from the hubbub of the city outside. Maria sat in front of the microphone, her headphones pressed against her ears, isolating her in a cocoon of sound. His fingers caressed the strings of the guitar, finding chords that seemed to flow directly from his soul. "Ready when you are, Maria," came the producer's voice through the headphones. She closed her eyes, letting the memories of the past few months flood her mind. The reunion with his father, the nights of struggle and forgiveness, the smiling faces of the young people in his music ministry. Every experience, every emotion seemed to converge on this moment. With a deep sigh, Maria began to play. The melody was soft at first, almost hesitant, like the first rays of sunshine after a long night. Her voice, when it finally joined the song, was clear and true, carrying the weight of her journey in every note. In the shadows I wandered, lost and alone, searching in vain for something to fill the void. But then, in the silence of my darkest night, I heard a whisper, a call so pure. The words flowed from her, like a river, telling the story of her transformation. Verses about pain gave way to stanzas of hope. The chorus spoke of a love so great, so deep, that it could heal even the oldest wounds. And now I sing, with my heart overflowing, of a love that found me when I was no longer looking for it. He lifted me up, hugged me, showed me who I am. In the song of my heart, I finally found my home. As she sang, Maria felt tears run down her cheeks. They were not tears of sadness, but of gratitude, of liberation. Each note was an offering, a testament to the transformative power that had touched his life. As the last note dissipated into thin air, there was a moment of reverent silence in the studio. Maria opened her eyes to see the producer, a normally reserved man, discreetly wiping his eyes. "Maria," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "That was extraordinary. I've never heard anything like this before." In the days that followed, Maria worked tirelessly on the album. Each song was a chapter of his journey, from the depths of despair to the peaks of redemption. There were songs about forgiveness, about new beginnings, about a love that never gives up. One afternoon, while taking a break from filming, Maria received a surprise visitor. Her father, Roberto, shyly entered the studio, carrying a bouquet of daisies, her favorites since childhood. "Father," Maria smiled, hugging him. "What are you doing here?" Roberto smiled, a little embarrassed. I wanted to see you in action. If it's not a problem, of course." Maria felt her heart warm. "Of course it's not a problem. There's actually a song I'd like you to hear." She took him inside the recording booth and grabbed his guitar. The song she played was different from the others. It was a soft ballad, a letter of love and forgiveness to the father she had lost and found again. Years of silence, of absence and pain, but love found a way back. In the ruins of the past, we build something new, a future where forgiveness teaches us to love. When the song ended, father and daughter found themselves in a silent embrace, years of heartache and regret dissolving into the notes of a healing song. The release of Maria's album, entitled Song of the Heart, was an event that no one could have predicted. The song struck a chord not only in the Christian community, but in a much wider audience. People from all walks of life have found comfort and hope in the honest lyrics and catchy melody. Maria found herself on a tour, sharing her music and her story in churches, recovery centers, and even small clubs, the same kinds of places where she used to perform in her search days. One evening, after a particularly emotional show, a young woman approached Maria, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Your music," she said softly, "made me feel like maybe there's hope for me too." Maria hugged the girl, recognizing in her the reflection of who she herself had been not long ago. "There's always hope," she whispered. "Always." Back in her dressing room, Maria picked up her diary, the pages now filled not just with song lyrics but with testimonies, stories of lives touched, hearts transformed. She smiled, realizing that her heart song had become a chorus, echoing in places she could never have imagined reaching. That night, as the world outside kept spinning, Maria sat quietly, her guitar in her lap. She strummed softly, letting a new melody emerge, a song of gratitude, of wonder at the path traveled. And as the notes flowed, Maria felt a deep peace settle in her heart. Her journey was far from over, she knew. There would be more challenges, more valleys and mountains to cross. But now she had a new song to sing, a song of hope, of redemption, and of a love that never, ever fails. With a smile on her lips and a silent prayer of thanks, Maria continued to play, her music soaring as a hymn of praise to the God who had transformed her life, and now used her voice to play countless others. The rising sun painted the sky with shades of pink and gold when Maria opened the curtains of her new apartment. The view of the city stretched out before her, a carpet of lights and shadows slowly awakening to a new day. She took a deep breath, letting the fresh morning air fill her lungs, bringing with it the promise of a new beginning. It had been exactly 1 year since that rainy night when she first entered the Church of Abundant Grace. A year of transformations, challenges, and growth that Maria could hardly believe when she looked back. His gaze wandered across the apartment, still partially littered with unpacked boxes. The walls, once empty, now proudly displayed the poster of his album, Canção do Coração. Next to it is a framed photo of her with her father, both smiling at a recent picnic in the park. And on the coffee table, a well-worn Bible, its pages marked and underlined, silent witness to his spiritual journey. The soothing sound of a notification on his mobile phone caught his attention. It was a message from Julia, his former musical partner. "Hey, Em, I saw his name on the billboards in the city. Who knew, huh? I'm proud of you, girl. How about a coffee this week to catch up?" Maria smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude. Even with all the ups and downs, Julia had remained a constant friend, an anchor in the turbulent changes of the last year. As she responded to the message, excitedly agreeing to the meeting, Maria heard a gentle knock on the door. When she opened it, she found Pastor João, his warm smile as comforting as ever. "Good morning, Maria," he greeted, his eyes shining with a mixture of paternal pride and anticipation. "Ready for the big day?" Maria nodded, feeling a mixture of nervousness and excitement bubbling up in her stomach. Today was the day of the official opening of the church's Arts and Music Center, a project she had helped conceive and develop in recent months. "Almost ready, Pastor," she replied, inviting him in. "I just need to get my guitar and we'll be on our way." As Maria moved around the apartment, gathering her things, Pastor John watched with a thoughtful smile. "You know, Mary," he began, his voice soft, "when you first walked into that church, drenched in the rain and carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, I could never have imagined the impact you would have on our lives." Maria stopped, feeling the weight of the pastor's words. "I couldn't imagine the impact you would have on my life?" she replied, her voice choked with emotion. The drive to the church was filled with a lively conversation about plans for the center. Maria spoke enthusiastically about the music lessons she planned to offer, about the support groups that would be held there, about how the space would be a refuge for those who, like her, were once lost and looking for a place to belong. Upon arrival, Maria was greeted by a flurry of activity. Volunteers ran around, hanging, banners, arranging chairs, preparing refreshments for the inauguration ceremony. At the center of it all was her father, Roberto, coordinating the efforts with an energy that Maria had never seen in him before. "Daughter," he exclaimed when he saw her, his face lighting up. "You arrived just in time. Come, I want to show you something." Roberto guided her to a room at the back of the center. When she opened the door, Maria gasped. It was a complete recording studio, small but perfectly equipped. "Dad, how?" she asked, amazed. Roberto smiled, a little embarrassed. "Well, I've been saving for a while. I thought it would be a good investment for the future. For you, for the young people who will come here, for all of us, really." Maria felt the tears form in her eyes. Her father's gesture was more than just a gift. It was a symbol of confidence, of faith in her future, and the impact she could have. The inauguration ceremony was a whirlwind of emotions. Maria saw familiar faces in the crowd, church members, young people from her music ministry, even some of her old companions from her bar days, all united, celebrating not only the opening of a new space, but the power of transformation and renewal. When it was time for Mary to speak, she found herself momentarily speechless. Looking at the crowd, at the smiling and expectant faces, she felt the weight of the moment. "A year ago," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I was lost, looking for something that would fill a void that seemed infinite. I found that something, or rather, that someone, in the walls of this church, in the smiles of this community, in the unconditional love of a God who never gave up on me." She paused, letting her words sink in. "This center is not just a place to make music or art. It is a place of healing, of transformation, of new beginnings. It is a place where each of us can discover the unique song that God has placed in our hearts." With these words, Maria picked up her guitar and began to play. The melody was new, composed especially for this occasion. It was a song of hope, of renewal, of a bright future that stretched out before them. In every note, in every color, we find a piece of the Creator. In this place of grace and love, together, we sing a new praise. As she sang, Maria saw tears in the eyes of many in the audience. He saw smiles of recognition, nods of deep understanding. And in that moment, she fully understood the significance of her new beginning. It wasn't just about her. It was about every life that would be touched in that center, every broken heart that would find healing, every lost soul that would discover its purpose, every silenced voice that would learn to sing again. When the music ended and the applause echoed through the hall, Maria felt a deep peace settle in her heart. His gaze met that of his father, of Pastor John, of Julia in the crowd, each face a reminder of his journey, each smile a promise for the future. This was truly a new beginning, not only for Maria, but for everyone there. A beginning full of possibilities, hope, love, and as the sun set on that historic day, painting the sky with vibrant colors as if celebrating along with them, Maria knew for sure. Her song of the heart was just beginning, and the best notes were yet to come. That night, when she returned to her apartment, Maria stopped once again in front of the window. The city shone under the starry sky, a sea of lights and possibilities. She smiled, her heart overflowing with gratitude and anticipation. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible even to herself. It was a prayer, a thanks, a promise, for all that had been, for all that would be. With a happy sigh, Maria picked up her guitar. His fingers found the chords of a new melody, a song not yet written, and as the first notes floated in the night air, she knew this was not the end of his story. It was just the first chord of a new and glorious chapter. Mary's story reminds us that God's love has the power to transform even the most difficult and painful situations in our lives. Through their journey, we see that forgiveness, while challenging, is a path to freedom and healing. And most of all, we are reminded that there is a wonderful Savior who is always ready to welcome us, transform us, and use us to touch other lives. May Mary's story inspire each of us to open our hearts to this life-changing love to face our own struggles with courage, and to sing, with our lives, the song of a truly wonderful Savior.